Well, a very warm welcome to everybody. We are so glad to welcome Shantelle and the team from Africa to join us this morning for the Child Theology Movement Network. And it's just really exciting for us to be able to continue to facilitate the sharing of such wonderful ideas around the world, of such inspiring projects and resources and writing, and perhaps most of all, people who continue to take to heart and to their work the idea of the child in the midst and the child theology being so important to who we are and what we do, and influencing and shaping all of our ministry in so many different facets. And so it's really exciting to invite Shantelle and her team to come and bring us more of a panel today, which I don't think we've done so far in this network. And so it's just wonderful to do that. And so I'm just going to hand over to Shantelle to introduce her team, and then Carolyn and I will facilitate the discussion later on. So welcome to everybody. Shantelle.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I am Shantelle Weber. I serve at the Faculty of Theology at the University of Stellenbosch, and I'm really glad to be able to introduce you to some of my colleagues working in the academic, but also in the communal spaces around South Africa and also around Nigeria, Kenya, and Rwanda. So we're really happy to be able to serve in this way this morning. Yeah, we're privileged to have colleagues from different spaces. I will introduce them in the order that they will speak. So we have our colleague, Dr. Shantelle Yates. She's a practical theologian at Northwest University in South Africa, and she currently serves as the chairperson of Child Theology Africa. She was involved with the child theology discussion probably first in this team out of all of us here. She was involved with our colleague Jan Groblaar for a long time. And then following her, our other colleague, Dr. Viola Fransman, also a practical theologian at Petra Institute, South Africa. Petra Institute has been quite instrumental in serving local congregations more practically, not just in Africa, but beyond Africa as well. And Viola too has been journeying alongside the child theology discussion for a very long time. So she will follow in sharing some insights from her side. And then, of course, all our child theology symposia and discussions and even book projects have always integrated the voice of practitioners engaged with local communities and congregations. And so we're really privileged to have two colleagues, a husband and wife duo, Richard and Ruth Lundy. They serve at a non-profit organization in Cape Town called Sikunye, which is an initiative of Common Good South Africa. Richard will be leading us in a discussion on what Common Good is doing with children, and also how child theology integrates with those discussions with many ministers and early childhood development discussions in the city and in South Africa. And then we are also privileged to have, broader than South Africa, our colleague, Professor Nathan Chiroma, who's a practical theologian as well, and also the principal of Africa Theological College in Rwanda. And so Nathan has been journeying. You hear me speak about Nigeria. He's from Nigeria, but he's also served in terms of the child theology discussion in Kenya, and is now finding himself in Rwanda. And so we're really privileged to have these voices with us today, and also being able to reflect on what child theology from a Southern Africa perspective looks like. So I'm going to then hand over to our first colleague, Dr. Shantelle Yates. I just need to line up her presentation for us. Just shout if you can see it.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you, Haneli, for being with us, and also as our chairperson for Child Theology Africa. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Shantelle, and thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So as Shantelle said, I'm from Northwest University and situated at the Potchefstroom campus. We have 3 campuses. So I'm here at the Potchefstroom campus. Next slide, Shantelle. Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that is familiar to the vision of CTA Africa, and then also introduce our colleagues, yes, to the vision, and that is to advance a child-friendly continent by doing theology with, for, about, and through African children. So you will see the position of children is very clear. It's not only about children, but it's also with children and through children. Now we have several publications in the child theology movement. I don't know, Shantelle, if we will refer to that later on, or should I now refer to that?
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. In 2014, I think, Jan Grobelaar and Gert Breed published 2 volumes on welcoming children in Africa. That was based on a conference held in Potchefstroom at Northwest University in cooperation with Petra Institute. And the theme was welcoming Africa's children in church and society. So there we had a very good beginning of conversations about the status, the position, the role of children and their voices in faith communities and in public spaces. And then we also have 2 special editions of a journal. The one Shantelle and Stefan de Beer edited, and the title of that volume, Shantelle, can you remind me of that title of the special edition?
No.
But it was also about I think intergenerational ministry with children, and that was also a volume with many contributors to that theme. And then myself, I did my PhD in practical theology with also a co-promoter from the law faculty with a focus on promoting the rights of children, and what the discipline of practical theology can contribute to that. So my publication with Ignatius Swart, who was my promoter, in 2012, focused on listening to Africa's children in the process of practical theological interpretation. And there we actually ask participants about the position of children, the status of children in theological training. And yes, I think that really stimulated my passion to become more involved in integrating a focus on children and the lens of children, child attentive theology, also in the curriculum of our students. Then I also had the opportunity to work with a Center for Child, Youth and Family Studies at Northwest University with some masters and doctoral students. And most of the students focused on children's participation, children's right to participation. So you will see publication 2 focus on the homeschooling context, and then publication 6 and 7 focus on sexual education and the context of a child and youth care center. So that was also in cooperation with colleagues from education, educational psychology, and social work. And I must say, I really learned a lot from being in a team, especially regarding research methodology and the ethics of doing research with children. It's always a challenge, I think, in the sphere of the academic environment. So I still need to get ways to initiate a project in theology to do research with children as participants. But that is something for the near future that I plan. Then I was also involved in a project, an international project, where we interviewed young adolescents, not in education, employment, or training, and we asked them about how they see the role of the church in their situation. And that is what publication 3 was all about, 3 and 4. And it was really about getting a bird's eye view on the role of the church in various communities in Norway, Finland, and then in South Africa. And I work with Prof. Christina Landman in Mpumalanga province with really rural youth. So it was very exciting to really listen to the voices of the youth in that environment. Then, Shantelle, you can go ahead to the next slide. Yes, then I have a PhD student who worked on the theme of child sexual abuse. And there we tried to work in the field of child theology, and specifically looking at the utilization of Christian doctrine as a theological resource, and specifically a relational view of the Trinity, informing a pastoral response to respond to child sexual abuse. So I think a way of also cooperation with colleagues in the field of child theology is to appoint them or to nominate them as examiners to also get their input. I think that is really to our benefit to be in conversation around students' work. Then the chapters in the book 1 and 2 was all about my PhD study, and publication number 3, the chapter was about a book project towards practical theology and ecclesiology of home. And I worked with Sine Shizali, who did a PhD on migrant children. So it was an attempt to focus on an inside and outsider perspective, and to again interpret the results of the children's voices. And then the last one was now the last chapter, or the chapter of that book project, together with our colleagues from Finland and Norway. And I must say that was really an exciting journey to put down the voices of rural youth, and that they actually challenge us by asking the question, do the faith-based organizations, do churches, congregations know where they are going with young people? And I think we can learn a lot from the voices of young people. And then with regards to community engagement, engaged scholarship, you will see that the poster is in Afrikaans, because the audience was in Afrikaans, but it's skills training in relational children's ministry, and it was in cooperation with Petra Institute. And I must say that the students and community members who attended that really enjoyed the skills training and engaging with families during this course. The next slide, we try to incorporate the approach to faith formation and faith mentoring, godly play, and we train our students in core training, and also we invite community members to also attend that. And I must say, when I look at the involvement of our volunteers at church who work with children, their whole mindset actually changed by being in dialogue with children and by being wandering with children after telling a story and storying with children. Next slide. It's also a program of Godly Play, Stories of God at Home. That was also in-person training. And that is a smaller kind of edition of the core Godly Play training, where you can utilize the whole methodology of Godly Play in the context of the home. And then lastly, we try at Northwest University also to stimulate some thoughts about children and youth ministry, and especially an inclusive congregational ministry, where we work more towards intergenerational ministry. So there was an open lecture with attendees from the community and students and colleagues. So that is more or less from my side. Shantelle, I just have to mention that I think our community engagement is at the moment more on the level of engaging with communities more than engaged scholarship. I think that is also a challenge for academics and working in communities, is to also try to do research about the outcomes of engagement and the research that benefit all parties involved, and not only some parties. So I think engaged scholarship is what we want to work towards. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Hanali. So you can see there's quite a bit of scholarship that's been going on for a while on our side of the continent. And yeah, we're in safe hands with Hanali being our current child theology chair. I'm going to now move over to Viola, Dr. Fransman from the Petra Institute. Please go ahead and have your 10 minutes, Viola.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to share screen, but I also sent an email just now, Shantelle, if you are going to do it on my behalf.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Can you guys see this?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So I've been working with Petra Institute for quite a few years now. And how we work is we consult with organizations and churches for whom children and families are important. The lion's share of the work we do is within the Christian faith community, but it also happened that we work with other organizations whose focus is not faith per se. Can you move it up a little to number 1 again, please? So we consult first, then we go through a process of partnering with these organizations that may or may not end up in training. Maybe their need is something different, so we refer them, or we do some other work with them. So we, when we do training, we have courses for practitioners and for parents, but these courses are developed alongside a set of principles that can be contextualized for any context. So when we say, or an organization say they're doing the anti-bullying course that comes from us, it will look different in Stellenbosch than it would in Mongolia. So the courses that have been developed the last year or so was the anti-bullying, relational prayer, relational children's ministry, and relational family ministry. Also aftercare, we have a huge focus on intergenerational faith transference and God, My Baby and Me, for which we leaned on the work done by Sekunye heavily. Courses in development, family course, and of course, God, My Toddler and Me. So the reason why we focus on a set of principles instead of a course or a program is that there is an abundance of material already available in social media, on the internet, in books. But what is it that the people we serve really need? And how can we help them to grow in the skills that they have? So the lion's share of the people that we serve is the poorest of the poor. We work in 56 countries, so it usually with the poorest of the poor, but we also have a bracket of people that are affluent, but is extremely busy and don't have time to work through a book or even to fit it into what is already happening in their homes and in their lives at the moment. One of the courses, the other courses that we are running is the Walking with Wounded course. It's one of the courses that is widely requested. So before COVID, we would do it in person. And during COVID, we started to do it online, adjusted. And this is just a testimony from one of the Walking with Wounded. There, can you move up the page a little bit, Shantelle? One of the testimonies that came in this morning of a partnership that we have with World Vision, who's working all over, and this course that we did was with people in Nicaragua and in other parts of South America, but also in the Middle East and in Africa, where we have a situation of refugee children or children on the move on their own. So equipping World Vision staff to walk alongside these children through trauma. They did feedback or evaluation of the program that we've been doing with them for 2 years already. And I highlighted it just there, the initial feedback that says that the program supports the communities and in an increasing position to help to communicate better and to build support for these children that are in need and in transit. Okay, so we work with practitioners and parents, but we also have a section of work where we work academically. Now, the person responsible for most of our publications that came out academic publications is Jan Grobler, who's also here. I see him. So he can tell us himself a little bit about the things that he wrote. But Petra's been working for 35 years throughout the world, and we've had anecdotal stories and testimonies from people that say this happened and this happened and this, but for many years it was something that we could not pinpoint and say this is the impact of the work that we have done throughout the world. So we did a course a year ago with Dialogues in Action and Organization from the US. They trained us how to do impact evaluation. And the first group of people that we used to do the impact evaluation on was the mentors and the children workers and the tutors in South Africa, primarily for the qualitative work, and then in other parts of the world for the quantitative work, to say that after 35 years, we can say the work that we've done has these 9 findings. Now, so you can see them on your screen, that our work is inspired by God, all about relationship, but we knew that the importance of mentorship that should be in place, that we should learn to speak the language of children. And then one of the findings that stand out for me personally, number 8, raising a village to raise a child. We always say it takes a village to raise a child, but we never go the step back to say that we should first raise the village, and that some of the work that we do or have done, where we've run into brick walls regarding culture and so forth and so forth. So that is what we are doing. For the things that we look forward to for 2024 and further on, is that we have a group of mentors in the field already that will be coming in for retraining. And they're not only from South Africa, they're from other parts of the world also. So they'll be coming for training in August year to us, so that not only for new skills, but to think strategically regarding ministry, to be exposed to what is there regarding academics and research regarding the work that they do. So thank you very much, Shantelle and the team.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so you're seeing that these are both academics really engaged within community spaces. And so, yeah, we've really been trying to bridge those gaps. And yeah, also everywhere you go, you find the father of or the mother of a certain thing. And so we have the father of child theology in Africa with us. Thank you for joining us, Jan. I think just to show you briefly, okay, no, I'll do that at the end. It's not showing. I'm going to then now move to colleagues who are engaged through a theological perspective with local congregations and also communities, and that's the work of Sikunya. So Richard, please go ahead. I will share the screen.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank Shantelle Weber for the opportunity to share today, the invitation, and thank you to the panelists for your stimulating input. It's wonderful to see names of people that have inspired our work, have spoken in some of our webinars, and to be able to be here today is a real privilege for us. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain what the work of Sikunya is all about, and then connect it to child theology in a couple of minutes. But Sikunya is an initiative of Common Good, which is a South African non-profit organization. You could also call us a faith-based organization that was started in 2005. And we aim at addressing 3 key stages in human development when the opportunity to nurture potential is at its most significant in early life, which I'll be speaking about. But we also have an education and an employment program. And I've been part of the Common Good team since we started the initiative, looking at the first 1,000 days of life, which is from conception up to the age of 2. And we piloted a program with pregnant mothers in vulnerable communities in Cape Town, South Africa. But by the end of 2016, we kept coming back to this question of saying, what is the role of the local church? And as you can see on the screen, we embarked on some rigorous research in 2017 and 18, asking that question: what is the role of the church in Cape Town to support the first 1,000 days of a child's life? And this included interviewing pastors, practitioners, parents, NGOs, government officials, and other role players. And this research has subsequently been published in the Christian Journal for Global Health. And out of the research findings, we launched Sikunya in 2019. And the name Sikunya means we are together in isiXhosa. And we believe that it takes a community to nurture young life. And we believe the church is uniquely positioned and already equipped to make a significant impact in nurturing our children's full potential. The church has the power to significantly help change the trajectory of South Africa in giving all children a strong start to life. And as Dr. Viola said, what we do as Sikunya is we raise the village to raise the child. But if you haven't heard about what the first 1,000 days are, let me briefly go into why it is such a significant part of a child's development. It refers to the window of time from conception to 2 years of age. And what science and medicine is telling us about this stage of life is that it's a never to be repeated time of brain development. The brain is rapidly growing up to even 80% of its adult size by the time the child reaches its second birthday. And it's in this time that foundations are being laid for all future learning, health, and developmental outcomes. We also know that this is a time of great opportunity, but also vulnerability in a child's life, as it's a time when the trajectory of a person's development is being established. Research tells us that 43% of children younger than 5 in low to middle income countries are at risk of becoming stunted, making it so much harder to thrive in life. And if I dive deeper into nutrition, nutrition in this 1,000-day period influences mortality rates. With the right kind of nutrition and care, a child is 10 times more likely to overcome life-threatening childhood diseases. You consider too that the right kind of care in this window also increases their ability to grow and to learn. Children who were exclusively breastfed in the first 6 months of their life go on to complete 4.6 grades more at school, and they can rise out of poverty because they go on to earn 21% more in wages as adults. So children who receive enough of the right kind of care in this stage are shown to be more likely to have healthier families of their own. It's a pathway of ending intergenerational poverty. And so you can see that the care received in the first 1,000 days contributes to the child's and to society's long-term health and stability and prosperity. But it's also a time of risk, because a baby in the first 1,000 days, if she or he does not receive or consistently get enough of what they need, they're put on a pathway of merely surviving. You can see on the previous slide the red line. If the foundations are not well laid and subsequently they have a smaller vocabulary, they don't build good relationships. They have health challenges. They're not ready for school. They're more likely to drop out of school and are at risk of earning less and engaging in antisocial behavior. And there are many negative factors that our children are facing that impact their development. And there are some of these on the screen right now, as you can see on the previous slide. And these negative factors increase this risk of stunting. That's physical stunting, emotional stunting, and social stunting. And their brain learns to just simply survive. They grow up struggling to learn and understand, and they fall behind. But there is hope. We know what all children need, and they are these protective factors. Research shows that even children growing up in tough and adverse circumstances can flourish if they're exposed to the right protective factors. There are things that we can do, but we need to be focusing in on the beginning of life, because as much as the brain can change and adapt later in life, it's this time in the first 1,000 days that's known as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get it right. And it's crucial to see that if we want children to thrive, we need to be focusing on the people who are providing what their young child needs. We need to be focusing on the adult caregivers in the child's life. This is the family. And when these adults, and whether they are mothers or fathers or grandmothers or other adult caregivers, when they are supported, empowered, and connected to services, they are better able to provide what their young child needs. And this is where the church comes in. I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. At Sukunya, we believe that the church is already positioned and equipped to be that supportive community around mom and dad, to be that modern day village to support them. Because we see the church as a social actor, able to address issues that are in the community. Within every local church are strengths, like the ability to build community, to journey with people through the life course, to make meaning of life, to provide sanctuary, to endure, to bless families. All of these can be leveraged to create a community in which parents are supported, equipped, and connected to services. And the model that you see on the screen right now is what we call being first 1,000-day friendly, or FTD friendly. It's not about running a particular program or course in the church, but rather the church using its existing strengths and assets to support families with young children, so that the family is better able to provide what their young child needs in order to thrive. Sukunya, we work with churches all across South Africa and some beyond, and have over 1,000 churches who have committed themselves to caring for families with children in this important stage of life. And these churches are across denominations, socioeconomic status, cultures. It's about as diverse as you can picture it. Now, at Secunia, what we offer, we don't work directly with families. We focus on reaching churches to inspire them, equip them, and support them to care for the families in their church and beyond. And so you're welcome to visit our website and to find out more information. We have a bank of resources. We try to connect what science and medicine or what theology is saying about young children, bring those two together that churches can put into practice God's heart for young children. Now, how does child theology inform what we're doing? Well, I know we all want young children to do right. Any compassionate human being wants things for children, like wants them to reach their full potential, to thrive, to have a future that is different from what they're currently experiencing, or to have a country that is growing and developing, having higher rates of school finishing and employment. All of those things compassionate human beings want. I mean, economically, it makes far more sense to invest in younger lives, ensuring that children, for example, are ready for school rather than playing catch up later on for children who are not school ready. But for Christians, there are a range of additional motivators. And one broad motivator for Christians is that this is a justice issue. It's not right that children, based on where they are born or who their parents are, that one child will be put on a pathway of thriving and another put on a pathway of merely surviving. All children should have the opportunity to thrive in life. And there are a range of biblical reasons for churches and individuals to participate or get involved. And a lot of what I do is working with church leaders to inspire them to take action. And some of the things that I regularly share with church leaders is God has deep love for young children. God knits together children in the womb. He's involved with life from the beginning. All infants, babies, and young children have value, dignity, and worth. In Scripture, we sing that young children are to be part of the community of faith. God's plans and purposes, his mission, includes young children. Other simpler statements like we are to love our neighbors, and our neighbors include the youngest of lives around us. Now you can see I've positioned that as very simple, very straightforward statements that can be unpacked in many, many different ways. But I'll tell you why we keep it simple in a moment. But one of the things that we keep discovering in our research and in our experience is that there's a gap between what churches believe and what they practice. So I've had to ask you now to reflect and ask you, what does your church do for families expecting a child? Or what does your church do for children under the age of 2? And what we found is that people agree that God loves young children, but their church practices don't represent that. There's this disconnection between belief and practice, or the gap between belief and practice. And our work is to see churches close that gap and effectively demonstrate God's heart for young children in their attitudes and their church practices. Now, you're welcome to finish screen sharing, but I want to share some of the challenges that we struggle with within Secunia as we engage with a wide range of church leaders. Is many times when we say children or young children, people age up. They think of Sunday school age children. They don't picture the infants. They don't picture the unborn child. Another challenge that we find as Secunia is we're a non-denominational organization, and we're careful to position ourselves as not instructing pastors. And we often take the posture of consider the scripture, or we don't say don't do this or do that. And many times we bump heads with some church practices that are perhaps harmful to baby or to mom and dad, but we don't have the authority to address it. Many times we're trying to inspire action, not instruct action. Another thing that we recognize is that many of the church leaders that we're engaging with don't have formal theological training. And so we have to keep our theological input at a very foundational level. And if I had to generalize, which I don't like doing, but just for the sake of brevity, I'd say that many of the pastors in our network, child theology resources are inaccessible. In a journal that they don't know where to find, or perhaps in a second or third language, or perhaps contextually not accessible or easily accessible for them. Sometimes children are not valued in and of themselves in churches. We learned this from Jan Krobela. I'm glad he's on the call. And many times children are seen as tools in order to reach the parents. They're not seen as valuable and worthy of our dignity and respect. Sometimes children are ignored because church leaders don't see them contributing to the life of the church, in a sense of saying this is a young life. They can't give, they can't serve, they can't tithe. Why should I care about them? I've got more important things to focus on. Sometimes contextual issues become a barrier for child or healthy child theology. There's often a struggle that I encountered. I was in KwaZulu-Natal last week. Big issues of teenage pregnancies, and churches feel the pressure saying if we provide care for that young child, we're condoning the sin that brought the child into the world, and get stuck with how do we value this child despite the child's background. And so in conclusion, in Secunia, we see child theology as essential to motivate, to inform, and shape the church's response to the young lives that are in their church and in their broader community. And we do, what we try to do is bring those two places together, what science and medicine brings, what theology brings, to empower, inspire, and equip church leaders to take action and give all children a strong start to life. You're welcome to explore more of Secunia on our website, and shoot us any questions that you have. We'd be glad to take the conversation further. Thank you, Shantelle.
Thank you, Secunia. Thank you, Richard. So I'm sure you have a lot happening. I see you guys taking notes. We'll get to that point with Paul and Carolyn facilitating. And now we welcome our last speaker for this morning, Professor Chiroma, who is sitting there in Rwanda. Nathan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shantelle. Thank you so much, colleagues. I mean, listening to all the conversations, I'm beginning to wonder, where do I belong in my own context, not a local church, but in the academia. My involvement in terms of publishing and engagement in child theology, it's coming from my experience with working with children in the context of violence in northern Nigeria. At a point, a child asked me, if there is God, why did he allow my parents to be killed by the terrorists? And then secondly, my motivation also, when I was doing my studies in South Africa, I was working in 3 settlements, and all such questions people ask, but you have a car, we don't have a car, and you are talking about God. How come God doesn't give us a car? So that's sparked my conversation and interest in child theology. But my publications, if you look at it more, mainly, it's in line with what Richard has just kind of tagged here, and see how do we equip the providers of this child theology in our context. And then that's my role as a senior pastor a couple of many countries many years ago. I realized that the people we entrust to form this theology with, for, and through children don't even have the theology themselves. One of the trainings I was doing with Sunday school workers a couple of years ago, I asked the question, a quiz, where do you find the book of Titus? And I tell you, I mean, to my amazement, there are 2 Sunday school teachers who have been teaching for more than 3 years, and they said the book of Titus is found in the Old Testament. So that kind of asks a question now, if we are entrusting them to shape the theology, to work with them, how do we help them out? And also, like Richard will say, my involvement with rural pastors in different countries, the more you engage with the pastors, you realize that they don't even have a clue of what they do with kids. It's just like a paid place to say, well, we don't want them to make noise for us, so let's keep them there, keep them busy, whatever it is, it's done there. So in terms of my community engagement, what I've realized in the academia and the 2 schools I have worked with, I've tried to establish the Department of Youth and Children's Ministry. And of course, also, one of my passion is to see sometimes we have this disconnect between the children workers and the youth workers. But essentially, that transition, if they are formed well from childhood and in their Sunday school ministry, when they are handed over to the youth workers, that conversation needs to happen because we all work together to see the intergenerational aspect of that ministry. So that's part of what I have been involved with. So I have established the Department of Children and Youth Ministry in the 2 institutions I have worked with. But also part of the passion for me, it's still like in Kenya now, for the couple of 3 years, every year we have organized what we call the Sunday School Workers Summit. This is where all the Sunday school workers are coming to have just like the basic theology, for you to lead a child in Christ. What does it mean for you to do this, to do that? And of course, to create an awareness, what should be the church involvement, especially the pastors, because that's where we have the really tough time. So my work, it's yes in the academia, but also in the as a practitioner, is to see how do we have a conversation with these pastors to help them understand that the children are not the church of tomorrow, they are the church of now. And that's the basic concept stemming from all that. So I have organized that Sunday School Workers Summit. Actually, this year it's happening again while I'm not there. Then coming to my involvement here in Rwanda also, there's a forum called the Forum of Born Again Churches in Rwanda. And that have given me an open hand to be able to work with the pastors. Yes, on one hand, I write the academia, like Richard said, we write all these papers. But now, how do we translate it to achievable parchments to somebody who has not even gone to school? Somebody who only speaks Kinyarwanda. So that we said, okay, since we entrust you with the child, we have these wonderful publications by the people who have research that informs your work. So we kind of break them down, translate them to kind of give them in chewable portions. And this year, by the grace of God, in the month of May precisely 18, we'll have the first Kigali Sunday School also Workers Summit, where we'll bring practitioners, we'll bring theologians, and we'll bring people who have been involved with child theology. So in my summary, my involvement, it's as an academician, published in the area of intergenerational ministries in terms of pedagogy, how we do that, but also my involvement with the pastors, my involvement with the people who are offering this theology, my also involvement with these children themselves, like my last visit to Nigeria, I went to one of the IDP camps. Some of you who knows I'm from northern Nigeria, you know the violence going on right now there. So my involvement with these children also to see, okay, well, it's one thing for you to do theology with an ordinary child, but how do you do that with a child who, even when you hit the table, he's already afraid? So that's the kind of conversation I'm looking forward to be having. So mine is to see how do I strike the balance between being an academician in terms of writing and then a practitioner as well. And I find that connection really, really helpful because it's a conversation that we need to be having so that we are not all in our bubbles thinking this is what we're doing, but the research we're doing is not translating down to where it's supposed to be. Thank you, Shantelle, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you to all the speakers. I will now then hand over to Paul or Carolyn, who's going to facilitate our Q&A session. Yeah, so of course you hear the heart on this end of the world that academics are really wanting to do the research, but with children in communities, and practitioners like Richard and Ruth are really engaged with us as academics in how they navigate even those practical situations. I always am quite amazed at how they call on. I know Paola and myself have been involved with Sikunya quite a bit, and they're constantly calling on academic voices to guide the work that they're doing in community. So thank you so much, Carolyn, and Paul, you take the lead here.
Great. I think Carolyn's going to facilitate our discussion, but thank you to all of you.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So, excuse me. Can I suggest that people put their questions in the chat so that we can make sure that we cover some stuff? But I wanted just to start with picking up on that point you made, Shantelle, about the dialogue between the academic and the practical, because I think that is an international issue. Certainly it's a conversation we're having here in the UK in terms of what we're doing with children's and youth ministry and the study of it. So just wondered how you facilitated, what wisdom you can share about that dialogue between the academic and the practice.
Anyone can respond, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I can start by saying, I think one of the things, and I'm really happy to have Jan with us, but one of the ways we approached just basic consultations as academics is always to have, like we do here now, practitioners and local congregational leaders present. By presence, they help us think and rethink what we are doing research about and who are the key role players. We've also engaged quite a bit when we do our academic presentations with those practitioners and local congregational leaders asking us things. And then I think for most of us, when we do write and try and publish about it, I know Sikunya has some reports that's also been published. We do then also have to engage with practitioners in how we do that. You will remember in our last session, just before Joseph had his talk, we were speaking about the dilemma about ethical clearances when it comes to children. And we're privileged to have Hanneli here, who sits on one of the South African University ethical boards. And so, Hanneli, I don't know if you want to share some of the challenges that we have to think about. I mean, we've realized in previous meetings like this that ethical clearance makes it more and more difficult to have the child fully present in our research. But Hanneli's also got the cap of those reviewing those applications on. So Hanneli, do you want to just share a bit about how we as practitioners and researchers can rethink our approaches to research when it comes to ethics?
You're on mute, Hannah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Shantelle. Yes, I do think that the ethical clearance is always a challenge when involving children. Children are considered as a vulnerable group. So it's much more difficult to get ethical clearance with children as participants than, for example, adolescents. Adolescents can, for example, give informed consent, also with the permission of the parents, but with children, it's informed assent, and the participation and the consent assent letters really needs to be on the level of a child, on the level of a child's development. And sometimes it's difficult for us as adults to really translate our research jargon and language in a child's world. So if I can name one example, do you want to participate? If you ask that question, for example, to a child, and you have a emoji with a sad face and happy face, I do not think that is really fair, because you can answer no, also with a happy face. So yes, I think it's very, very tricky. And I think, yes, the question is also who is benefit from the research? Is children also benefiting from the research? How will children get the results of the research? Will it be really translated to them in a child-friendly manner? So, yeah, there is so many things to consider when applying for ethical clearance. Also, I think sometimes other disciplines are even more critical about theology. They wonder about the position of children, say, for example, in a Sunday school setup. Are children in a position of how can I put it? Living out their own spirituality, or are they, in a sense, dominated by a certain tradition? So yes, it's tricky to explain, but having the best children, having the best interest of a child at stake always. Also in working with children in, for example, an educational setup, and especially in a faith formation setup. How do we mentor children? How do we acknowledge their vulnerabilities, but also their strengths, their vulnerabilities, and also their capabilities and gifts? So when we, for example, overemphasizing the biological stages of children, we can underestimate the spiritual wisdom of children. And I think really here is where child theology have a very important role to play, is to provide complex understandings of children and adults' responsibilities towards them. So, yeah, for me, a key question always remains, children, are they also benefiting from the research? Will the transformation that we are working towards be to the best interest of children? And we're setting the agenda. Is it only academics, or is it academics in partnership with practitioners and communities involving children? So yes, Shantelle, that's more or less my response to that.
It's interesting that in your talk you talked about godly play changing the mindset of the adults as they were listening to the children exploring the Bible story, and I wonder if that's part of that response, is that actually how do we facilitate adults listening to children engaging with scripture and faith and all of these other things as well. Joseph asked a question. I wonder what resources there are, or if there is any work being done about children that have been caught up in crime, or where children are actors of violence. Nathan, are you aware of anything in your context where you're working with children who are experiencing violence?
Well, in this case, most of the children are the recipient of the violence, so they are not involved in the crime. It's mostly an adult crime that they are perpetrated into. In terms of resources, I know, like, one of the cities I work with, it's a lady who talking about actually godly play on how that can help them overcome violence. So far, that's kind of what I know, but the resources that I use are just the normal resources for normal children, not giving them that attention for understanding that they are coming from a context of violence. Yeah.
Mm.
Carolyn, can I add something to that? Last year, Sukunya hosted a conference exploring this big topic of violence against children and what the role of the church is. So it was beyond the first 1,000 days. But what we discovered as we addressing that space is many church leaders feel overwhelmed, saying there's these things going on inside our church and inside our community, and I don't know what is my role. And so we brought in different speakers, and the major messaging was, what is your kind of scriptural motivation to not be a bystander to the violence that's in your community, but to be an actor in that space. And then very quickly pointing out a range of different organizations, civil service, civil society, government services, all those things that a church can make use of. So not saying, church leader, you need to not only have a biblical understanding, but you need to do everything yourself. He's saying, no, partner with those other role players that are in your vicinity. And then also trying very quickly to connect churches with each other, to partner and saying, I've seen this, I've observed this, a child has shared something in Sunday school around this. What is our process? In our context, we have the Children's Act, which requires churches to have a child protection policy. So pointing people to organizations to help churches put that in practice. And so in many ways, saying that church leaders, they might have a heart for it, but may feel a little bit stuck. And as an organization like us, we're trying to point to other resources that are available and saying, it's not so much academic in nature, but going, I'm motivated, but now I know what I can do. I'm not feeling like I've put a load of bricks on my back and I don't know what to do, but actually giving them practical ways of engaging.
Thank you. I think, in your logo you had the speak up thing, and that certainly seems to be a common theme in a lot of what we are hearing. Nice to see your face, Jan. I'm hoping that you're able to respond to Keith's question about the seeds of child theology in Africa, and how you have encouraged people to speak up and to listen.
Can I come in here with a few remarks? And that's not firstly to answer Keith's question. By the way, good morning, Keith. It's quite nice to see you. And hello to all the others. Yeah. Now, the first remark that I want to make is on research and ethical clearance for doing research with children. I think that's one of the things we most need in South Africa, is to do much more research much more research with children in the midst. I think much of our research is still adult thinking about children. How we think children should think. Sorry, my phone is, I just have to decline this. Sorry for this. We have to find a way. And I think we're a lot published on doing research with children. But I think as child theologians, we need to target ask somebody to go and sit and write a manual for child theologians to do research with children in the midst, so that we can get ethical clearance. Otherwise, we stay with adult thinking about children. We can involve how many stories about children and how many experiences with children, but it's still how we as adults experienced it and how we think about it. And we are not really sure how children are really thinking about their life context. That's the first one I want just to make this comment. The second comment is, I am now in the position that I'm back in ministry in a congregation. I'm about a year here in the specific congregation. And I think sometimes we don't understand the context of the rural congregations like the one I am in. A rural congregation in the Northern Cape, which is a very small congregation. I'm living in Brandvlei in the Northern Cape, about between 3,000 and 4,000 the population. But sorry to use that term, but the white population is about, in the town, about 40 people, 40, 50 people. The rest are more from the colored or black community, mostly colored, mostly farmers, about 90 kilometers around Brandvlei, spread out, about 110 members, most of them elderly people. The average age of the congregation is 60 plus. About no children in the congregation, a lot in the community. But it's also a very conservative community. Some people still living in 30 years ago, with much tension between the different parts of the community. A congregation that struggles financially, a congregation or a community that is struggling with 9 years of drought. How do you motivate such a congregation to get involved with the children in the community? It is not as easy as some of us think, or we sometimes, as I think in the past. Because in the past, I mostly had in my mind a bigger congregation. How do I get over these tensions in the community to get them involved with a lot of children that's present in the community? and to think theological about these children, because they are struggling with survival. They are struggling with a lot of other things. Even many of them do not understand the identity of the church. Now I want to, I'm just putting this on the table, that I think we have to really understand there are a lot of big congregations. There are a lot of congregations in other settings. But in the Northern Cape, most of the congregations, this is their context. And we have to help them. And after a year here, I don't know how. Really. I can help them with talking about identity, talking about a lot of things in the community, but there are people that's coming from a background in the apartheid area, working for the police, working for the defense forces, and they still have that mindset. So, sorry, I'm talking so long about it, but it just came to my mind that I have to put this struggle in some culture, some context, to really address the issues around children.
Yeah.
It's not only our thinking, our theological thinking about children, but real practical issues that I'm not sure how to handle it. And most of you who knows me know that I were involved with child theology from the beginning of the 2000s. I've published a few pieces on it, more broader than child theology per se, more children and theology, I will put it. But we have to take that also into consideration, even when we decide on what research we are doing, how we are going to help the church, how we're going to put children on the agenda. So sorry, I haven't prepared anything for today, but I just wanted to share this, and not that I think it's so much worth, but if anyone wants a list of my publications in the field of what I will call broader child and theology, then I can make a list of that. I think the last one that I was involved with was this book on God's heart for children. Since then, I haven't published anything because being a pastor at this stage, I just are not capable to make the time to do research. I had a few projects the last 2 years that came to my table. I just had at the inset, I don't have the capacity at the moment to do it. I hope when my contract ends here at Brandvlei that I will have still time to get more involved. But at the moment, it's very difficult for me. But we need more research. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think, sadly, what you've said is encouraging, not because I think it's a good place to be, but I recognise it very much from, I work for the National Church of England, and that's the really big thing we're wrestling at the moment with older congregations who don't seem to realise the importance of this whole area of work. So yeah, it's I think it is an international problem, and perhaps that's where we do need to be sharing the resources. And I think I was intrigued by Nathan's point that the resources are so inaccessible, or people perhaps don't have the time to engage with them, or they don't know where to engage with them. So I think for me, that's one of the conversations that we as trustees need to be having. We are in the process of revisiting the website and trying to make sure that resources like this whole conversation are readily available and accessible. but it's how we signpost that as well. And Joseph has responded to your point, Jan, and said, yes, please, to the list of the stuff that you have written. You'll be pleased to know that the chapter that you wrote in God's Heart for Children was the starting point for the MA teaching that I'm doing with a group of students. So thank you for that, because it has been really, really helpful. So we've got about 10 minutes before we finish. So are there any other questions or points from anything that anyone has said that you want to pick up and just sort of question?
I think for me, just to add in the area of resources, sometimes we have the resources, but we kind of suspicious of each other, if you know what I mean, you know.
Yeah.
And then with all kinds of theologies coming in now, so people are really careful to see what resources are there. And that's why now it's helpful, you know, Jan will give us now, you know, this is an authority. So that when you even tell the pastors, these are the resources, they trust you because they know you are coming from that engagement. So I think also, I think what will also help us is to continue that conversation and trying to see, like Jan talked about, we are approaching the children with our own adult mentality, which is the same thing we see at Sunday school workers. They believe they know what the child needs to know. They don't even allow them to ask the key pertinent question that they struggle with. They just make them memorize that. But I think also that networking, like Richard and Ruth are doing, how do we have a conversation between all of us that are working, both practitioners, the academia, but also to now find a way to say, what are the legitimate resources? Because people treat resources now with suspicion. Of course, you know, the different theological things that are happening around different traditions in different churches. So I think with that, we need to kind of have a way from that and to see the resources are there. How do we streamline them? How do we share? How do we help people get the right resources that would help them, especially that will be contextual, because sometimes it's one thing to have the resources, but another thing to make them really contextual where people are working. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah. I love the point about making a manual to do research with children. And I think that's something where the scope of expertise that we have in the room, yeah, I think that could be a really exciting venture to think about. One of the things right at the beginning, Shantelle, you said that you're hosting the International Association for the Study of Youth Ministry in 2026. This is not to ambush Sally at all, but one of the questions I had from the one I attended in January of this year in the UK was the amount of stuff that was directly on children rather than on young people, and aware that, you know, there's a whole big debate and discussion about what is a child, what is a young person, and that kind of stuff. But I think there is an exciting opportunity for the child theology movement and the work that we've heard about this morning to really speak into that conference and perhaps address that balance in my head as well, and for us to really look at how that can be a source of really good research with children, and a place where we can learn, all of us can learn how to do it better as well. Any other thoughts or questions?
You can't ambush Sally because she's gone on another call. So it was a good.
Oh, right. Okay, that's Bruce and then Keith.
I guess a thought that's just popping around in my head and just listening to you, Jan, as you talk about the challenges of pastors and really saying, like, how do we meet the church leader where he's at with the challenges that we have? And I know within the work that we have within Secunia, working with such a wide range of churches from such a range of contexts, what we try very hard to be is less prescriptive and more trying to say to them, you have strengths that God has given you in your space. So, you know, I had somebody today message me, but my church is small and there's no pregnant mothers in my church. And so saying, like, how do we inspire and encourage in a way that doesn't feel like they're getting more weight put onto them with all the challenges that they're trying to pastor through, and saying, what is it that God's given them in their space? What are those strengths that I strongly believe God has given each of our churches gifts and strengths that could be used to really support and encourage families and children in the space. And so trying to understand where the pastor is at and the church leaders at in their space, and then just to keep breathing wind into their sails in spaces that are really hard and tough, where they are facing many pastoral challenges. So that's kind of the posture that we try and take at Sukunya, is really trying to say to church, you've got strengths, you've got things that God has given you. How can we maybe look at them slightly differently and see how we can use this to minister with and for families and children in the space? But by no means wanting to undermine or diminish the challenges that the local church is having in their different spaces.
Keith.
Yeah, just three things. One is that Jan speaks from the depths of his heart and experience, and in a long train of people. So Karl Barth said it almost exactly the same thing. When he left academia and went to a church, he found he had nothing to say. Christianity Rediscovered, another example of that, among the Maasai, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and then Van Gogh, who went as a minister and then found that the miners were starving. And so he, instead of preaching, he started trying to find coal to warm the houses. So, Jan, thank you for telling it as it is. Second thing is that it strikes me over and over again that a role for CTM is to be a trusted and contextualized. By contextualized, that's meaning rooted and grounded in science, medicine, theology, on the ground with, for, by children, but also internationally connected. So we're making sure that things don't operate in silos. I think for some of us, this is an astonishing range of resources, Shantelle, that you're providing. And the question is, how do we make sure that is shared and amplified? But I want to close with the elephant in the room, and that's a conversation I've been having since the last event, if you can see this, God and the Victim, by Professor Jennifer Best. And she's connected with the child theology movement because of her overwhelming concern about the abuse of children within the church. And so it's just, we've discussed church as a village and church as a resource. But the reality is, choose your denomination, because casting stones doesn't help at all here. And so Jennifer speaks as a Roman Catholic, struggling with what to do, God and the victim. So here theology starts crashing into the reality of the cries and hurts of children. So I just want to say that that's something we haven't mentioned, but and I'm just now conscious that this is being recorded. It's a little bit difficult because we may need Paul and others to, she might not have wanted this to be said, but this is part of a conversation that if we're going to be real, then that we can't leave this elephant unnamed.
Yes, thank you. And I think we do have to be real. Otherwise, what's the point, really, isn't it? So I have asked Rich, thank you, Richard, to put the link to the research into the chat, because I think that would be helpful for all of us. We will put the recording of this on our revitalized website. We would also love to put any of the other documents or bibliographies or PowerPoints that you've shared with us today that you think would be helpful. Jan, your list of publications, because as Keith has just said, if we are going to be a trusted space for that, and as Nathan said, it's signposting, and it's making sure that the all of the things that we are able to share can be shared through that website. Paul.
Just to really thank everybody for the thoughts. Going back to the research practitioner, I put in the chat one of the systemic changes that we've done in healthcare chaplaincy is to include research competency and research literacy in our professional standards. So therefore, every healthcare chaplain has to show their competency and literacy at least in that area. And I'm not sure where the original phrase was coined from, but I've only heard it in healthcare chaplaincy. This idea of a pracademic, and I really like that. I find that really helpful for what we can aspire to. And perhaps go as far as to say it's absolutely essential that that's what all of us need to be, wherever our original starting point is, as either a practitioner or as an academic. That we're challenging healthcare chaplains that they've got to be a pracademic. They've got to have a research evidence for all that we do. And I just want to say, it's a shame Nathan's gone. I don't know whether he saw my comment, but one of the first compilations that we did in the latter days of developing child theology, of taking it further, I did an article around placing a sick and dying child in the midst. And so I do think, picking up Keith's point, placing, the abused child in the midst, and having those conversations between Jesus and those children, and with those around, I think is a really helpful paradigm in which to continue that, of what they would want to say to each other, and what the listeners and those involved in the conversation would be. So I think we are wanting to do that. And so, but just to thank you all for your contributions. I love the raising a child, raising a village to raise a child. I thought was just so articulate, and the disconnect in transitions, God, me and my baby, and the first 1,000 days of conception, I thought was some really helpful comments for me, that I've kind of noted and want to take away and develop. So I think we've got some real fantastic points that you've all shared. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So we do need to draw to a close. People have got other meetings and things to get to, but thank you so much for your contributions. As I said, we will be putting this on the website. Our next gathering is scheduled for the 15th of May. So we will let you know who we're going to asked to contribute, but we do hope that you will be joining us for that. Keith, can you close us in prayer, please?
Yeah, if I do that and preface it, if I can say, Shantelle, thank you to you and the team for the way you've just made it possible for us to converse. So thank you so much, because this is very special. So much was born in Africa, and dear Jan knows that it was very obvious to me early on, as I listened in different parts of Africa, that child theology would grow and develop in Africa. But the challenge is that the experience and the wisdom is transferred across the world. That's the challenge that we face, a challenge we face. So we pray. Father, thank you so much that we as your children, sisters and brothers, in and through Jesus, are able to lay before you and before one another our hearts and our heads, our longings, our pains, but all the time knowing that you are child attentive beyond our imaginings, and that Jesus has shown us the way. So help us, we pray, individually and together, to follow where he has been. We ask it, trusting that by your Spirit, seeds that are sown will grow in your way and your time. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Shantelle, again, and the team for sharing just wonderful. Really, really appreciate it and look forward to disseminating this around the world as we continue to develop. And please come back to us, as Carolyn has said, any suggestions, further topics, further networks, would really be pleased to hear from you. So thank you very much. Bless you guys.
Tot ziens. Tot ziens.
Tot ziens.
Tot ziens.
Tot ziens.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.